Hi, welcome to week 2. We're going to cover cascading style sheets or CSS and HTML forms. And both of these are basically helpful when dealing with JavaScript so that we can format our page properly. The forms are also useful for JavaScript that we can pass data from one web page to another via these forms and fields, that type of thing. So let's just jump right into it. And again, what you can do is open up the link to the WC3 cascading style sheets. And you kind of follow along. At any time, you can pause this video to go ahead and play some of the different, play around with some of the different, where basically you can click, say, let's try me, type of a thing. So feel free to just pause the video, play around with that, modify the code a little bit, have some fun, and then you can come back and watch the video. So basically, why use CSS? Well, CSS allows us to really format our pages. We can get really down to the nitty-gritty of how we want things to basically show up. And so this is, let's click to try it for yourself. And here it basically shows, and again, they'll cover this in a little more detail, but we're going to put this right up here in the styles section of our head. And right inside there, I say body, and I've got a left brace and a closing brace. Inside there, I say background color is light blue. All H, and this is the entire web page, because that's the body. All H1 tags are going to have a color white, so that means the font will be white, and the text align will be centered, so it'll be centered between the margins. And then all paragraphs will have a font family of Verdana and a font size of 20 pixels. So now when we come down into the body of the text, we've got H1, my first CSS example, and this is a paragraph. You'll notice that the font is white and centered, and the text for the body, for the paragraph, is Verdana, and it's a 20 pixel font size. Right? So just kind of getting your feet wet, just trying to show you the ropes. As you can see, CSS is very, very powerful as far as formatting web pages. So the next thing I talk about is syntax, and so let's talk about what is going on here. So the very first thing, the very first part of a CSS is the selector. What are we going to modify? And then we're always going to have an open brace and a closing brace, followed by a semicolon. So here, so H1, it's a font tag. It's going to be a color blue, meaning the font's going to be blue. The font size is going to be 12 pixels. Now, we come down here and look. So here is a P color red, text align center. So anytime we use a P tag, the font will be red and it will be centered aligned. If we try it for yourself, there we see that. So again, if I come down here and just typed in hello and ran it, we would see that hello does not follow the font or the formatting of a paragraph or a heading. So it basically doesn't have any formatting at all. So it just defaults to whatever that body of that particular browser is. So let's talk about selectors. So we've got the P tag here. Again, all P tags are going to follow this. But we can also say, you know what, I want this to be specific to certain things. And we have two things we can utilize. We can utilize what's called an ID or a class. Now, really the only difference between them is an ID is made for a specific selector, and a class can be used among all different types of selectors. Now, the way we distinguish an ID is inside of our CSS, we put a pound sign. So here I've got pound sign para1. Para1 is just a variable name. It's just a name we basically attach to this. It's going to basically be text align to center, and the color is going to be red. So let's take a look at the code and see how it's utilized. When I come in here, so notice inside my style, within the head section, I've got $para1, text align center, color red. Now when I come inside here, notice I got a P tag, but inside that I've got the word ID. The $ and the ID go together. So the $ says this is going to be used as an ID. So when I say ID para1, notice para1, hello world is going to take on that formatting. So notice it's red and center align. There it is, text align center, color red. We'll basically follow that. And then here's a normal paragraph with no ID added to it, and it said this paragraph is not affected by the style because we didn't apply that ID parameter to that. So now we've got what's called a class selector. Now, for IDs, we use the $. For class, we use a period. So I've got period center, and it basically says text align is center and the color is red. So inside of here, I got p.center, text align center, and color red. So when we take a look, I got p.center align, so it's aligned, the center align in red. When I come down here, I got h1 class equals center. Okay. Let's take a look at this one. And here we have p.center, we got text align center and color red. We got p.large. And so here I've got, which is a font size 100. So notice I've got class equals center, p class equals center, and p class equals center and large. So notice we basically are including two separate classes together. So this one is just the h1 tag. This does not be affected. And this one will be center. So you notice it's red and centered. And this was centered and large. So it's going to be centered and red, but it's going to have that 300% font size. I just want to touch on this, but we can do an asterisk, and that will basically affect everything inside of that. It doesn't matter what you use; it's going to basically have, it's going to be affected by that. So everything will basically follow that. And I don't think I can recall ever that being used. But just realize you can do it. So here we've got an H1 tag, an H2 tag, and a P tag, text align center in red, center in red, and center in red. Well, they all do the same thing. So how about we basically just save some code, some lines of text, and I could just say H1, H2, and P all have center, alignment, and red text. Okay. So those are IDs and classes. ID uses the pound, classes use the period. One thing I wanted to point out is, I'm going to go back to that, is notice I've got the dot center here, okay? So notice the H1 so uses the class center and the P uses the class 1 center. When we go back and we see the P.center, what that says is only the P class can use that center, not the H1 class, only the P class can. So that's why it doesn't work for the header. So what we're saying is we're restricting the dot center to just the P class. Okay, so let's take a look at some how-tos. So this is probably the most important thing on CSS, in my opinion, as far as how we set it up for a page. We have three choices. We can either do what's called an external CSS, an internal CSS, and a line CSS. So for an external CSS, what we can do is we can create a separate file called mystyle.css. And inside there is going to have this code. This is all the code it's going to have. Body, left brace, background color light blue, closing brace, and then H1, opening brace, color navy, margin. Left is 20%, or 20 pixels. So that means on the left-hand side, we're going to have 20 pixels before we start our text. So, if we look at this code, here I've got my head. Inside there I've got link related to a style sheet, and the href, which means a link to mystyle.css. So this file has to reside, since I don't have a path statement in front of it, it has to reside in the same exact place this HTML file resides. So in here I say H1, this is the heading, and P, this is the paragraph. Now since we had the body set as light blue, and the H1 is blue text, and notice it's got the 20 pixels left margin. See how it's kind of tabbed in a little bit? Because that guy says, hey, leave 20 pixels reserved for the margin. And then this is the paragraph. Notice we didn't have anything set up for the paragraph. So that basically goes there. So that has no formatting at all. So that's an external style sheet. Now, when do we use external style sheet? That's if we want to apply it to more than one HTML page within our overall grouping of pages. And that's the reason you definitely want to use a external style sheet for that. That way there you don't have to type in the same code for each page since it's identical. You just put it in one spot and it's utilized by all the pages. The next is internal. This is what we've seen so far, and that basically is in the style tags within the head. Okay, all of the code is there inside of the style tag. That's an internal style sheet. So we've seen this. So there's really not a whole, we don't have to really go into this a whole lot of detail because we've seen this, but we got style, beginning style tag, and here's our ending style tag. And there I say body is going to be at background color of linen. H1s are going to be maroon, and it's going to have a margin left of 40 pixels. So here's 40 pixels margin. There is the maroon color, and the background color is called linen. Okay, so that's an inline style sheet. Then we have what's called an inline CSS or cascading style sheet. So how does this work? Well, we kind of saw this in the previous week's examples where I use style inside of a tag. So it's called an inline style sheet. So I got style equals color blue, text align center. Separate. Notice we use the semicolons to show where one ends, another one basically begins. What that says is for this particular H1 tag, we're going to make sure the color is blue and it's aligned. For the P, we're going to make sure the style is, so everything inside this paragraph is going to be a color red, and it's going to say this is the paragraph. So we try it for ourselves. So there is our blue heading. It's text align center. This paragraph is red because we said, hey, make sure the color is red for that paragraph. Now look, if I created another paragraph, just a standard paragraph, and typed in the word test and an ending paragraph, notice it doesn't have any formatting at all because we're not using any style at all. So the question you should be asking yourself is, can I use an external, inline, and internal style sheet? We most certainly can. We can use them all together. So if we look right here, I've got an inline style sheet called my style sheet. It's the same one, it's background blue. And I'm going to say style H1s are going to have a color orange. Now, if I remember for the external, yeah, the H1 was set up as navy and had a margin left of 20. But if we come down here and you see the multiple, you'll notice I'm changing the H1 here to color orange, and then well, I could do this. I could say style equal text align, colon, center. Okay, I got to put double quotes around this. And when I run it, notice it basically changed that paragraph. So here's how it works. Inline styles, inline CSS will override any internal or external. Internal CSS will override any external. So if you want to override what's already there, so for example, I could actually say style equal color green, and when I run it, notice that heading changed to green. So in the external style sheet it said make it blue, in our internal style sheet it said make it orange, but my inline said make it green. So green overrides the other two, internal overrides external. So even though I might have an external style sheet for all of my pages in my grouping of web pages for my site, my website, I can then go in and override those particular items with an inline or an internal style sheet to basically, so I don't have to follow that external 100% to the law. I can basically override it. Okay, and that's kind of what they talked about here, the cascading order. Now, just like anything else, whenever we create this code, we got to make sure that we add comments to it because people are going to come in behind us and be basically doing development. So what we need to do is come in here and add comments. Now, comments for style sheets is the beginning of a comment is a / asterisk, and the ending to end a comment, we have to do an asterisk /. Okay, so wherever there's a / asterisk and then an asterisk /, everything between those two will be ignored by the CSS code. Now we can put it on a single line by itself, or I can actually put it after code. I can do it multi-line because it says I don't care how many lines you're going to put this on. When I see a / asterisk, I'm going to comment everything out up to the asterisk /. Okay, so what I want you guys to do at this point is pause this video and go over to the classwork within the Google Classroom and do CSS Class Lab 1. And when you're done, come back to here. Okay, so we've kind of looked at a lot of this yesterday, so I'm not going to spend a whole, or not yesterday, but the previous lecture. So what I wanted, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but I just kind of want to hit the highlights of the different colors that we can utilize. We can change the color of our page. We can change the color of the background color of our text, background color of our page, the background color of our paragraph. So here we have H1 style background Dodger blue, which is up there, and I've got background color tomato, which is right there, and that's how it's going to look. Yeah, so here's my body, and I've got H1. I'm using inline CSS style, background color Dodger blue, hello world, so notice the background color is blue, and then background color tomato. I could even actually change this and say text dash align colon center, ending semicolon, and it will basically make that text center aligned as well. So here they're changing the color of the font itself. Whenever we just say color, that changes the font just itself. Notice up here it said background color. So notice I got tomato, Dodger blue, and medium C green. So there's tomato, blue, and medium C green. We can also do borders. I could say border 2 pixels, so it's 2 pixels wide, and it's solid. We got tomato, Dodger blue, and violet. So there's tomato, Dodger blue, and violet borders. So RGB, remember RGB is red, blue, green, or red, green, blue. So here's 255. That's the most red you can use. 255 is the highest number you can use. And I got a little bit green and a little bit of blue, and it gets this tomato-looking color. If I wanted to get the actual color itself, I remember I showed you how we could go to that. You can actually do a search for HTML colors, and you can actually click on a specific color that you want, and it will bring this. It's a hexadecimal number, and you can actually bring that in with the pound sign, and that's just that is tomato as well. We also have this HSL, and what that says is, I might have said this wrong the other day, but the 9 is what's called the hue. I don't know if you remember the old TVs back in the day. You guys are probably too young for that, but you could actually go in and change the hue, and it would basically, you had the whole full color spectrum. Well, tomato is a 9, and then it's 100%. What is 100%? And then 64 is basically 100%. I think is saturation. No, I think 64 is saturation. I think it's going to explain here in a little bit, so I don't want to confuse you. We can also use RGBA, and we can also use HSLA, and that has the A has basically what is the transparency of it. If I do 0.5, that's 50% transparent. What's nice about that is if you have, let's say, a background image and you put this over the top, it will actually you can actually see through that color, and you can see the background as well. So yeah, so here they do the same thing. It'll show up just like this. Okay. Yeah, RGB. So the first color is red, next color is green and blue, and they're kind of show you what that. So there's red, there's blue. Notice blue is 255. The other colors are 00, and then so we can actually play around. I can actually drag this over and make it more green, make it less red, make it less blue. There's green. So as you can see, we can really kind of play around with this and really get a feel for what specific color that we want. Now here's what's nice when we add 60, 60, 60, or 90, 90, 90, or 120, 120, or 8, you can see it makes different shades of gray. So if I were to notice when I get into I make these all in the 30 range, it's basically looks black. Yeah, so here it talks about how transparent do you want it. So it's really 0.1 is really transparent. Okay, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the hexadecimal number. Those are you have to find that color wheel to find the specific color that you want. Yeah, I think if it's green. F and hexadecimal, F has the largest denominator. So notice in the red, when it's red, the FF is on the left. When it's blue, the FF is on the right. And when it's green, the FF is in the center. Now this will explain the HSL a lot better for us. Okay, so so the first one is hue. This is really where you can really find this. This goes through all the different colors. Again, 255 different colors. No, there's more than that, apparently. And then saturation is how dark do you want it. And then lightness. Okay, the last one is lightness. How dark and light do you want it? Okay. Next thing we'll cover is backgrounds. So we can do backgrounds as color, or we can do it as an actual image. So first we'll talk about color, and we've kind of seen this. We've already seen this before. In this particular case, it says make the color the background color of our body. That means the entire web page light blue. And then we can actually do the same thing with our H1. Now we haven't talked about div tags yet, but we'll talk about those in a minute. We got div and we got p. And so here is, we can also do opacity. So I can make the background color green, but I can say, hey, how dark and light do you want it? And here's opacity 1, 0.6, 0.3, and here's 0.1. So you can make it really, really light, really, really dark, or somewhere in between. RGBA is 100%, 60%, 30%, 10%. So that would look, so here is RGBA, 0 red, 128 green, 0 blue, and 0.3 transparency. How basically transparent is it? What would that look like? It would look like this. So here is 10%. Yep. Here's RGBA, 10% opacity. Okay, let's talk about background image. So here, when I say background image, I'm going to use a URL attribute, and there I'm just going to put in the file and the path. So in this case here, paper.gif needs to basically be stored in the same place that this HTML is stored. So when I run it, that's what it looks like. Now, how it works automatically is it tiles it. It just goes boop, 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 boop across the screen, and boop, 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 and just kind of just keeps tiling it as it, and that's just how it lays it out. Okay. Now we can control that, and we'll talk about that in a lot of detail here in a second. Here is another one, and since I just throw it out there, that's exactly what it is. It's tiled across here. So apparently this particular image is, so if I did a right click on this and save, let's see, can I do a, I can't, I'm trying to click save image as, I don't see it. So apparently we can't grab that background. So that's, again, I can make a background of a paragraph. So if we look, this paragraph, so if we use a P tag, it's going to have this paper.gif as the background, and we can kind of see that right here. Okay. I don't know if you'd ever want to do that. If you wanted a particular paragraph to have a background image, I would probably set up an ID or a class to do that. Okay. So by default, background images repeat. So just like I said, it tiles it across the screen. So all the way across the columns and then down each row all the way across. Okay. Now, so here's my gradient. So this guy is basically a picture about this big, okay? So it basically gets tiled across this, and then it drops down a row and tiles it again, tile, 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 tile. But what if I just want to have it repeat the columns and not the rows? So we have Y and X, okay? So if we repeat X, it's going to repeat just basically across one row, and that's it. So it does. So here's a picture repeated. It's just repeated as one row, and the rest is basically doesn't have any images at all in it. And that's what repeat X does. Okay. So if I took this and copied that and went up here to this gradient, no, sorry, wrong one. That's going to look exactly like I just talked about. If I went to background image and I'm going to, this paper, if I added that to that guy right there, look what it did. It just basically has one row of the paper, and not tiled row after row after row. Now, we can also say no repeat. No repeat says just do it once and that's it. And so here I've got this image in image tree.png. And notice there is my tree. And it starts in the left-hand column and basically works across. Now again, if I were to comment this guy out and click run, see what it did? Now it tiled it. It went across each row, each column. If I take that out, it just says show it once, but do not repeat it. Now, you'll notice when we ran that, the text was over the top of that. What if I didn't want that to happen? Well, I can actually add the position I want that image to display. In this case, I want it to appear in the right top. So when I run this, so here I've got the image tree, no repeat, right top, and then it says right margin 200 pixels. What that means is no text will basically go beyond this 200 pixel mark right here. So notice how it wrapped right after the word the text. So we got that tree right there. It's kind of cool. So we can have that picture show up on every page in the upper right hand corner. Maybe it's your company logo we could do, whatever the case may be, but we can have that image displayed up in that upper right hand corner. Now the only problem is, since we have that 200 pixel margin, that margin is all the way down the page. So no matter what, this space down here will basically be empty and that picture will not show up. What if we did this? What if we said repeat X? What about repeat Y? So we got X and Y. Y is vertical and X is horizontal. So now we can do one more thing. We've got background attachment. So I've got the same tree, no repeat, right top, and it's fixed. What does that mean? Well, let's take a look. Let's run it. So we got a whole bunch of text here, and as I scroll down, notice that the tree stays right there. So I told it to say fixed right there, don't move. As we scroll on this page, that will always stay in that upper right-hand corner. Or we can say, you know what, I want you to scroll with the text. So the background attachment is scroll. So notice that as I move this up and down, the picture goes with it. I think that may be the default. So if we comment that out, and I click run, yeah, that is the default. So we don't really have to ever say attachment scroll. So now so here I've got body, I got background color, FFFFF, background image is a tree, background repeat, no repeat, background position top right, or right top. There's a shorthand for this. Instead of having 4 lines, I can do 1 line. I can just say background, that's the color of the background. There's a URL to put an image, no repeat, right top. Notice there's no commas, it's all uses spaces. So now when I run this, there is my, and now notice we still have the margin 200%, or 200 pixels I should say. Notice everything works just fine. So that, by the way, background FFFFF is white. If I made it all zeros, that's black. Okay. Okay, so before we continue, go ahead and pause this video and go over to the classwork and open up CSS Class Lab 2 and play around with that. And when you get done, come on back here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is CSS borders. And CSS borders do just what you think it's going to do. We can put a box around something. And we can do a square box, we can do a bottom border, we can do a top border, we can do a border on the right, border on the left, we can do a border with rounded corners. We can also do a dotted border, a dashed border, a solid border, which is the default, a double border, 2 lines, a grooved border, kind of looks like it's 3D, a ridged insert, onset, no border, and then a hidden border. Okay. So here's a great example of a lot of different dash, solid, grooved, whatever. So here's a dotted border, here's a dash border, here's a solid border, double, grooved, a ridged, an inset, an outset. So the inset looks like it's pushed in, the outset looks like it's raised. No border, a hidden border, and a mixed border. Ah, look, I can make the top dashed, the right, or the top dot, right dashed, solid, and then looks like a double. Could be an inset. Okay. We can also change the width of our border. So there's a border with a 5-pixel border. Here's a medium. We don't have to use actual numbers. We can actually say the word medium. I can do a 2-pixel border width, or I can do a thick border width. So we can use pixels, we can say medium, we can say thick, we can say thin. We can set, so that here's how we can do that. Solid, solid, solid. So this is what it would look like. These are all 3 solids. Yeah. Now, if we take a look at this, it says border width 5 pixels and 20 pixels. What the heck does that mean? Well, the 5 pixels are the top and the bottom, and the 20 pixels are the left and the right. So if we see 2 numbers, the first number is for the top and the bottom, the second number is for the left and the right. So here is solid 20 pixels, 5 pixels, so there it's just the opposite. Top and bottom are 20, the left and right are 5. And now I've got 4 numbers. Whenever you see 4 numbers, what that means is that the first number is going to be the top. The second number is going to be the right. The third number is going to be the bottom and left. So it's always going to be in a clockwise motion. Okay? Always starting at the top. So the top is 25 pixels. The right is 10 pixels. The bottom is 4 pixels. And the left is 35 pixels. So top is 25. Right is 10. Bottom is 4. And left is 35. We can also change the color. And we just say border color, red. Just say color. So here's red, green, blue. And again, if we see 2 colors, the first color is for top and bottom. If I see 4 colors, it's top. 4 is top, right, bottom, left. We can also use hexadecimal values. We use the pound sign and then the 8-digit number. Either 6 or 8. It's either 6 or 8 numeric values. We can also do RGBs, and we can do HSLs. Border size, so again I can say border top is dotted, border right is solid, border bottom is dotted, and border left is solid. So basically there, that's what that would look like. I could do dotted solid, I do 2 like that. Again, The first one means top, bottom. The next one means left and right. Okay, so if we look at this one, there I've got, so everything's going to be center aligned, everything's at the body, and then I've got P.4 border style, so it's going to be dotted, solid, double dash. So top is going to be dotted, the right is going to be solid, bottom is going to be double dashed. Okay, so that first one looks like that, and yep. So you can look at those at your leisure. Oh, if you ever see 3, so we talked about 2, talked about 4, what happens if you just see 3? 3 means that that's the top, the sides, and then the bottom. So the first one is the top, the second one is the sides, both left and right, and the third one is the bottom. Okay, border shorthand. I want to put it all on one line. So this says I got a border. It's 5 pixels, solid red. Just what you think it's going to be. It's going to be 5 pixels wide. It's going to be a solid border, and the color is going to be red. This one is going to be 6 pixels wide. It's going to be solid and red. Okay. This one here, if we look, the border left is 6 pixels, solid red, and the background color is light gray. This is for the paragraph. So notice the left is a red, and then notice the background color is a gray, light gray. That one's got a bottom border, 6 pixels, solid red. Now let's talk about rounded borders. That's going to be a border radius. So the more pixels we add to the border radius, the more rounded it's going to be. So notice I've got a border radius of 12 pixels. What if I made that 20 pixels? And it's really round at that point. Okay, let's pause here. So pause the video and go over and do CSS Class Lab 3. When you get done, come on back. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, next one is margins and padding. Margins are, think of the page itself, and these are the margins, the top margin, the side margins, and the bottom margin. We can distinguish each on its own. I could say margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left. So in this case here, we're saying the paragraph in this case is going to be 100 pixels, the bottom is going to be 100 pixels, the right's going to be 150, and then margin left is going to be 80. So let's see what that's going to look like. So here, I'm using a border, and so let's talk about div tags real quick. Notice we're using a div, a div tag. Now what a div tag is, it does absolutely nothing. There's nothing attached to a div tag. But what we use div tags for is we use div tags for CSS. So I'm saying if you use a div tag, the border is going to be one pixel solid black. The margin top is going to be 100. Margin bottom's 100. Margin right's 150, 80, and then the background color of that border, whatever it is going to be light blue. So notice we've got our solid border. On the top between this heading 2 is going to be 100 pixels. The left is going to be 80. The right's 150. And the bottom is 100. So there's basically 100. We can't tell it's what's there unless I typed in test right here, and then we could see what that is. So there's my 100 bottom border. Now shorthand, just like everything we've seen so far, if I have 4, that means the top, right, bottom, left. If I see 3, the first number is top, the next one is the side, so left and right, and the next one is the bottom border. If I see 2, the first one is the top and bottom, the second one is the left and the right. If I just see one number, that's all 4 together. That's the top, right, bottom, and the left. All of them have 25 in this case. So here you notice we call it margin collapse. In this case here, the top has 0, the bottom has 0, the right has 0, the bottom has 50, and the left has 0. This one here is going to basically have 20 in the top, and then 0, right, bottom, and left. So there's heading 1. So you see heading 1 has 0 margin at the top, and 0 on the right, 50 on the left, has a bottom margin of 50, and each has a top. Okay, so here's what they're trying to show is here's how this works. The top margin had a 50 at the bottom, and the margin 2, the H2 heading had a 20 at the top. Now the difference between these two should be 50 pixels, but what happens is it takes the largest number of both, and that's the one it uses. So in this case, it's going to make it 50. So there's only 50 pixels difference between this, not 70, and that's kind of what they're trying to explain here. It should have been 70, 50 plus 20. However, due to the margin collapse, the actual margin ends up being 50. Okay. Now, padding is just like margins, except padding is when you're inside something. So if we look here, I got a div tag called padding top 50, right 30, bottom 50, padding left 80. Let's take a look to see what it basically is aligned to. So I've got div. We got a border and a background color. So notice the top is 50. Now notice there's not 50 between that line and the top of the borders. What they're talking about, so that would be the margin. If I wanted the margin of the outside of the box, that would be margin. When I'm inside the box, I use padding. So inside the padding, the top is 50, the right is 30, the bottom is 50, and the left is 80. So margin is outside the box, padding is the spacing inside the box. And again, just like everything else, when you use the shorthand, if you see 3 numbers, the first one is the top, the next one is both the left and right, and the bottom is the last one is the bottom. If you see 2, the first is the top and bottom, the next is the left and right. If you see 1, it's for all of them. Okay. Let's go to the fonts. Let's talk about fonts. And fonts are kind of, it's not straightforward in CSS. So what we first want to talk about is serif and sans serif. If you ever see the word sans serif, that means there are no little tags they call serifs at the end of these words. Serif fonts, notice how they got these little tags? See them in red? Those are called the serifs. So there's certain fonts that are serifs, and then there's some ones that are sans serif. So serifs are like Times New Roman, Georgia, Garamond. Sans serifs are Arial, Verdana, Helvetica. Monospaced. Now, let's talk about that as well. These are called, the word just left my brain. But basically, they're going to be spaced depending on what letter it is. A capital letter T takes up a lot of width, where a lowercase I just takes up very narrow, and it will butt them all together. With monospace, each letter will always take up the same exact spacing. So notice a Courier, Lucida, Council, and Monaco, each one of those letters takes up the same amount of space. We got cursive and fantasy, so but really all we need to know right now is serif and sans serif and monospaced. So to do that, I can say font family, double quotes around Times New Roman, comma, Times, comma, serif. So what this means is, if Times New Roman is not available, then use the Times font. If that's not available, then grab the default serif font that you have available to you. Okay? So I got Arial, Helvetica, and sans serif. It says if you can, use Arial. If that's not available, use Helvetica. If that's not available, go ahead and use sans serif. Same way with this last one. If those two aren't available, use the default monospaced font. So for text, all I really want you to know there is you can change the color. You can also change the alignment, which we've talked about. I can make it centered, left aligned, or right aligned. Decoration. I can make it let's just talk about decoration. I can make it over the line, so I can put a line over the top of the text. I can put a line decoration line through, so it just like strikes out the text. I can underline it, or I can overline and underline at the same time. I believe I could underline and line through at the same time. So I could actually do, notice it put a line through it and underlined it as well. Okay. Yeah, and we can make the text decoration color separate from the text as well. So here I've got the overline and make it red. The line through is blue. The line under is green, and the line over and under are both purple. The text is still black. We can also change the style from solid to double to dotted to dash to wavy, and we can actually do underline, and the color is red and the style is wavy. We can also do the thickness. We can change the text decoration thickness. Auto will use the default size for that. We can make it 5 pixels, 25%, whatever the case may be. Whatever you need. So we look at the text transformation. Now this is kind of cool. I can actually say, you know what? I want to force everything to uppercase. So whatever's typed in, make it uppercase. I can default it to lowercase, or I can do what's capitalized, which are basically the first letter of every paragraph will be capitalized. We can do text spacing. Where I can basically say I want the indent to be 50%. That means indent that particular text in 50%. I can do letter spacing at 5 pixels, or in this case, -2 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. So here is 5 pixel spacing between letters, and here's -2 pixel spacing between letters. We can also do line height. That's basically, think of how tall a line will be. Yeah, or I should say the spacing between lines. Word spacing, same thing. We can put spaces between words. So the letters will be normal, but the spacing between words will be changed. Okay. With font, we can also do font size. We do font size by %, or we can do font size by pixel. So we could do this. I could come here and say font dash size colon 25 pixels semicolon. When I run it, it makes that guy now 25 pixels. I could make this font size. I think I can do large. I can do extra large. I can do XX large. I think I could go with triple X. Yeah. So we can do that as well. We also have, I'm just going to touch on this briefly, but I can also do font size. I think I talked about this in the last lecture. We can do what's called 4 M's, and that's EM. And that's the width of an M of that font family. So whatever that font family you're using, the width of an M, and this one, in this particular case, it's each letter is the width of 4 M's. We can also do X's too. I think it's EX. Yeah, that's the height of an X. So in this case, it's going to make it. So once we make an X 4 high, it'll make each letter basically be that height as well. So I got pixels. Oh, we can also do percents. So I could actually say 100%. That's 100%. I could do 500%. That makes it so. So I can do percents. I can do pixels. I can use the word large. I can also use the word small. I can do extra small and XX small and so on and so forth. So a lot of different ways to do that. So go ahead and pause this video and go ahead and do CSS Class Lab 4. And when you're done, come on back. Okay, go ahead and do Class Lab 5. I'm going to make that optional, so if you want to pause the video and go ahead and do that, it basically is going to utilize IDs and classes with the font sizes, so you can play around with that a little bit. But after that, we're just going to go ahead and jump into forms. Okay, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but again, like I said in the first lecture, is we can spend literally weeks talking about forms. Like I said, we have HTML, we have intro to HTML, we have advanced HTML, we have expert HTML, we have CSS involved in that. We've got forms are all in there, so we can really. But I'm just trying to get you acclimated to it, just familiar with HTML, CSS, and forms. So what is a form? Well, this is a form right here. We've basically got a text box, we got a button. So this is just a really simple basic form. So if we take a look at it, let's see what it looks like. So this is what a form looks like. We have a form tag. And what this says is when this form is executed, it's going to go ahead and go to the actionpage.php. Okay. So inside of this form, notice I got my form tag there, my beginning form tag, and there's my ending form tag. And all of these things inside there are specific to a form. So I've got a label, and what is it for? It's for the F name. And then we actually display the word first name, colon. We've got an ending label, and then I have a BR, line break. Again, remember what I said? We should always have a forward slash in all of our tags. Even if it doesn't have an ending tag, put a slash at the end. Then I got input. Now input is a specific type. It is a text box. Okay. So this label is right here where it says first name. That's the label. The input is now this text box, and it says what type of input is it? It's a text. The ID is going to be called F name. Now this is different than the ID we saw for CSS. This is specific to, this is more going to be aligned to how we're going to use it in JavaScript when we get there. So the ID is very important. The name of that field is F name, and the value is John. Now, if I took this John out and just left it blank, now it's going to let me type something in there where I can actually type a name in there and basically utilize it that way. Oh, I went too far. And then I've got another label called last name. So there's the last name label. And then I've got my next text box, which is called L name, and it's going to have value of dough, and again, I'm doing that just for the example. The last thing I have is a type submit, and that is basically a button. That means when you click on this button, it's going to do whatever this action says right here. The value it says is submit. Notice it's got the word submit. There it is. Then after the form, it says if you click the submit button, the form data will be sent to a page called action page, action_page.php. So when I click on this, it basically went there. Okay. This is that PHP page that was just brought up. So that's the introduction to a form. So the first thing it talks about is the form element. We've got the form and the ending form tag, and then we talked about the different types, and that's basically what it looked like right there. The label element, that basically is just displaying text on a page. There's nothing we can do with the label element. Radio buttons. Now those are kind of cool. Radio buttons allow us to, they show us some different options that we can choose. Now the thing with the radio button was we can only choose one of them. We can't choose more than one. So if we run this, so there I've got my input radio, the ID and name, so it's HTML, and then the name of it is called FA, so fave language. And then I've got a label, HTML, and then another type, radio, CSS name. Now you don't notice, with radio buttons, the name has to be the same for all of them so they can be grouped together as one radio button group. So the name is fave language, name fave language, name fave language. The ID for this one is HTML. The ID for this is CSS. The one ID for this is JavaScript. Now again, the IDs and the names are very important once we get into JavaScript. They're going to have a lot more meaning for us. And then label JavaScript, JavaScript. Okay? So the label just displays the label, but the radio button is this little circle right here. And this little circle right here for the first one has an ID of HTML, but it's part of the fave language radio button group. Okay? So again, when I click on one, and I click on the next one, the previous one is unchecked. Very important that the name is the same to group like radio buttons together. Because I could do something like this. I could actually have, I'm just going to duplicate these for a second. I'm just going to call this fave 2. And when I run it, oh, I forgot to do a line break right there. There we go. Notice I can check these and these are now separate because they're a different radio button group. They don't affect the other ones because they have a different name. Fave2 language, Fave2 language, Fave2 language. Okay, so those are radio buttons. Next thing we have are called checkboxes. So instead of using radio, we're going to use type checkbox. They're just like radio buttons. The name has to be the same. I'm sorry. No, we don't. The name doesn't have to be the same. I'm sorry. And the reason for that is because I can check more than one box. So they're each like a separate entity. But again, the ID and the name are very important to JavaScript. So once we start incorporating this in JavaScript, when I click on something, that's going to mean something when we go to another page, and JavaScript has to know what that ID and names are. Right. So the ID and the name in this case are going to be the same. Do they have to be the same? No, they don't have to be the same, but it doesn't hurt to keep them the same. But notice the type is checkbox, then we got a label, checkbox label. If I didn't have a label in there, it would have nothing next to the checkbox itself. So I have a bike, I have a car, and I have a boat are all three labels. The submit button, we talked about that. It's a type submit, and then the value is submit. That means that's the label it's going to put on that button. The name attribute, if the name attribute is omitted, the value of the input will not be sent at all. So here's what we're basically doing. When I have a name attribute, when it gets passed to this action page PHP, you'll see nothing was received. Why? Because there was no name tag for that item. So if I add a name tag, so I call it name equal fname, now when I run it, watch what happens. Fname was actually passed to that second page. It's going to be very, very important with JavaScript once we get to that point. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head, knowing that the name attribute is very important once we get into the JavaScript part. Okay. I think that's basically about all we need for forms at this point. Let's see. Well, for right now, let's go ahead and pause this video and go ahead and execute and there is a form class lab 1 I want you to do. So pause that and come right back. Yeah, there's a few more things we need to cover. When we have this form action, we can actually tell it how do we want that second page to be displayed. So I have a target parameter I can put after the action. In this case, I got target equal, and if I have an underscore blank, that will be a new window or tab will be displayed. If I do underscore self, it will basically be displayed in the current window. If I do an underscore parent, it will basically go into a parent frame. That's I don't want to talk about frames, so ignore that. And then underscore top will display the full body of a new window. Okay, but really all we need to know right now is underscore blank underscore self. So blank, if I run that, it actually opens up a new tab. Okay. Stop. Okay, oh, I want to do that. Okay. So underscore blank opens up a new tab. Underscore self stays in the current window. I think underscore self is the default, so you really don't have to ever use that, but you can use it if you want to make sure that it goes to the same page that you're currently in. Now, this next section, the method attribute, very, very, very important. Method get and method post. What they do is that's how we get data passed from this web page to another web page. We're going to need that when we get into JavaScript. So I'm going to use the get first, and it's probably easier just to show you. So it's got method get. So when I click submit, this is the get method. If I click, I want you to pay very close attention to the URL up here. It's got question mark, F name equal John, ampersand, L name equal Doe. That's how it gets the data from one page to the next. The page that it's basically being sent to can read the URL. The problem with that is everybody can see it. So if you're passing sensitive data, you probably don't want to use a get. What you'd want to use that in that case is a post. So if you do a post and I click submit, notice up here in the URL it was not passed. So why won't we use a post for everything? Well, it says a get appends the form data to the URL, as we just saw, so it puts it right in the URL of the address. Never use get to send sensitive data, like I just said. The length of the URL is limited to 2,048 characters. Useful for form submissions where the user wants to get a bookmark result. Get is good for non-secure data. Post appends the data inside the body of the HTTP request. So the actual request behind the scenes, what the browser kind of uses behind the scenes, it's kind of put in there and basically passed over. Post has no size limitations and can be used for large amounts of data. Form submissions with posts cannot be bookmarked. So basically, gets are a little faster. So if you just got just a simple form, you're going from one to the next, gets just fine as long as you're not passing sensitive data. Posts do require a little bit more time and effort, so they basically use a little more memory. So just basically be aware of that. So the next part is form elements. These are very, very important as far as how unique and vast we want our form to look. So we have input, we talked about label, we got select, text area, button, field set, legend, data list, output, option, and opt group. Okay. So the very first thing we know text, we know labels. Select is kind of like radio buttons, except it's a drop down. I have to click a drop down and I can select one of these and then click submit. So when do you use a radio button? When do you select? Well, if you've got a whole lot of stuff to select from, you'd probably want to use a select, because radio buttons are going to be sitting there. If you've got 4 radio buttons, it's going to take up 4 lines of space on your web page. If you've got 20 different things you want to select, you probably won't want to use a radio button. You'd probably want to use a drop down. Could you use a drop down for 4? You most certainly could. It all depends on how you want your web page to look. If you've got a lot of stuff on your web page, maybe selects are better because they won't take up that much space. When you click on the drop down, they show up then. We can also pre-select an item. I can actually say selected equals fiat. So here's my selection of all the different names. But right in here, I said select ID, option fiat, selected fiat. Notice the very first item that's selected is fiat. It's automatically selected. So you can have a default show up. Text area, this is very useful if you want them to type in a whole big lot, maybe a paragraph of data or a sentence of data. You'd want to use a text area. So in this case here, I said I want a text area. I want it to be 10 rows tall, and it's going to have 30 columns, which is basically characters. So now you can basically type a whole lot of data in that text area, and then when you click submit, it gets basically passed to the next page as well. The button is like a just like a submit button, except we actually use the word button, and then when you can tell it what to do when you click. So with the form, we'd use submit, but if you just want a button, just to throw a button out there and have it do something, you could say on click. Now this is actual JavaScript right here. So this is kind of our very first thing we're going to do in JavaScript next class, and that's the alert. So I can actually click this, and it says on click, do an alert. So when I click this, boom, there's my alert, hello world. We're going to see a lot of that next class. Field set and legend. So here's what field set and legend is. Let me just run it so you can kind of see what it is. See what it looks like first. Notice I got this box around it, and it says Personalia. So the field set element is used to group related data in a form. So I got a field set, and then I've got a legend, and then I've got my input, labels, and all that type of thing. Now, field sets are great for radio buttons. It's a great way to group radio buttons together. So I would use a field set and a legend for a radio button is a good spot for it. So if you want to basically have a form that has different things grouped together, you could do that. Or you could have all your form together in a field set and legend. So, yeah. But notice the field set and the ending field set and then legend and an ending legend. So that basically is the box that goes around this. Okay. Okay. The different input types that we have. I've got a button input type, a checkbox color, date time. I'm not going to go through all those, but just realize there's more than one input type. For right now, we're just going to pretty much just use checkboxes, radio buttons, text boxes, and text areas. Attributes. Yeah. Value. So we can actually preload a text box or pre-select a item with the value. Value is just for text boxes, I believe, and text areas. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about the rest of these because again, this really is more for that. So we're going to close it up right here. If you want, go ahead and do Form Class Lab 2. We'll use the field set and legend. And play around with that. Play around with all this, all you want. There's also a homework assignment you can utilize. Again, if there's any questions, please email me. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. If we need to do a Zoom call, we can do that as well. So we'll go ahead and see you next lecture.